How's it going, Knicks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Fireside Knicks. I'm your host, Dylan Backer, and tonight the New York Knicks won their second preseason game, defeating the Washington Wizards by a score of 117-94. It was a dominant win from start to finish. Now, I know it's just a preseason, and it is the Washington Wizards, after all. They're not a very good team, so we can't really look too deeply into this one, but I will say there are a lot of good things we can take away from this, more specifically from our new all-star duo of Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. Jalen Brunson logged in 23 points on 7 of 10 shooting from the floor, amazing efficiency, and Karl Anthony Towns, after a really slow start in the game, really kicked it up a notch in the second half and finished with 25 points, 12 rebounds. Just an unbelievable game, really, on the stat sheet from him. Wasn't the prettiest of games, like I said. He started out slow, but overall, I think we really got a good glimpse of what those two could be together, and it was something really special. It wasn't even like their best game, yet they still dominated. And there are lots of other things we can get into, so we're just going to jump right into it. So, of course, the first order of business, like I just said, Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. Those two guys, in the second half especially, they really were working that pick and roll so well, and I think that that's going to be one of the best, if not the best, pick and roll or pick and pop tandems in the entire NBA. Those two guys were just unreal in the second half. They were getting to their spots every single time. It was really a joy to watch. The Knicks haven't had a center like Towns really ever in their franchise, a guy that can shoot, and even on the off nights where he isn't shooting the ball well, because he only went 1 of 7 from three-point range, by the way, which, of course, is not the typical Karl Anthony Towns stat line you really see from him. Of course, this is a guy who's a near 40% shooter from three-point range for his career. So, of course, it was an inauspicious Garden debut, I guess, for Towns, if you will, but he still made a tremendous impact in other areas of the floor without the shooting, without the fact that he wasn't hitting his shots very well at all whatsoever. Which, of course, you want to see the shots fall. Don't get me wrong, you want to see those 3-pointers hit. But the fact that he was able to make plays near the rim and stuff like that after a slow start, of course, because the first several shots, it was a little rough out there. Everything was falling short. Jonas Valanciunas kind of had him in a box that entire first quarter. I was like, dang, what's going on? Why is he leaving these short? But then he really figured it out. And credit to him, he was getting to the line a lot. He shot, I think, like 10 of 11 from the free throw line, which is a pretty outrageous figure. If you're not going to hit your shots, then I guess that's a good way to get your points, to draw fouls and get to the line. And you know what? I like that. This is a guy who's willing to be aggressive in attacking and stuff like that, and I'm happy to see that. I know he didn't shoot the ball well, but I think he really made an impact in other areas where you really needed him to, and he did his job. And you know what? The Knicks ended up winning by 23 points despite an off night from Towns. So that's always a good thing to see. Like I said, I know it's just the preseason, but still, we got to see how these guys play together because this is a brand new team. So it's encouraging to see him have a good performance. Now the next thing I want to get to, the defense was tremendous by the New York Knicks tonight. Tremendous. And it was led by Mikal Bridges, their other offseason acquisition who they got during the offseason. He was tremendous on his own, but the defense as a whole collectively was phenomenal. Washington had 30 turnovers. 30 turnovers, which is an absurd number. Of course, that's just terrible ball control by Washington, but that also speaks volumes to the Knicks defense as well, and just how much pressure they were putting on them, to force those bad passes and stuff like that, and really get those turnovers. Mikal Bridges had 3 steals himself. OG Anunoby had 2 as well. Those two guys on the perimeter, oh man, that's going to be so much fun. I knew it was going to be a lot of fun once we got Bridges, just because of the idea of those two playing together, but seeing how it looked tonight, oh, I'm really excited now. And I know it's the Wizards again, and I know they're not very good. Even in preseason, of course, they're not good, but even in the regular season, they're one of the worst teams in the league. I understand that, but at the same time, Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby are all NBA-level defenders, and the way that they just made the Wizards look tonight, I'm really excited for what they can make even better teams look like. How they can make the Celtics look on offense, how they can make Philadelphia look. They were just getting turnover after turnover after turnover, and the Knicks also had 16 steals as a team. 16 to Washington's 2. So they were really all over the place on defense tonight. I was really happy to see that. I don't think anyone was really concerned about the defense, just because, we have Tom Thibodeau as a head coach, defensive-minded coach, and you have talented defensive players in the guys I just named, like Bridges and Anunoby. Josh Hart as well is another talented defensive player. but they really made a statement tonight. They were everywhere. I was very impressed with that. And that's a good thing to see, considering that their defense in the opener against Charlotte was not the best. It really wasn't. They won that game, sure, but they, allowed Charlotte to shoot the ball really well. They didn't let Washington get anything whatsoever. And I'm really excited for what that means for the regular season and how that's going to translate. That I'm really, really excited for. So that was another thing that I really wanted to point out. But the next thing I want to get to is the bench unit, and in particular, Tyler Kolek. We mentioned Tyler Kolek in a separate video. We talked about him the other day and how he performed really well in the opener against Charlotte. Well, he really shined again. Miles McBride sat this game out with an illness, so Kolek got an expanded opportunity to get some minutes, and he dazzled again. He had 15 points, 15 points and 5 assists on 6 of 10 shooting in just 17 minutes. I mean, he was everywhere again offensively, and I really think that this guy can solve a lot of problems for that bench unit. And, I know he's going to have some competition to kind of crack that rotation spot, but he really did a good job tonight on offense, and I was very impressed with it. And he's an active defender for his size as well. I mean, I know his defense is considered a pretty weak part of his game, but if he can be active on that end of the floor and, just kind of be that little pest, if you will, I'll take that gladly. Honestly, I will. Out of my backup point guard, I will take that. And just given what he does for the playmaking aspect and the shooting as well, the Knicks could really use that. They really could, and I think there's an argument to be had that Kolek has kind of jumped Cameron Payne on that depth chart, and I'm going to get to Cameron Payne in a second because he did have a pretty good game too. So there is a little bit of a battle now for that backup point guard spot, if you ask me. But I think Kolek made a really strong impression once again. I think so far in these first 2 preseason games, he has been one of the biggest, most pleasant surprises so far, and I'm really excited to see what else he does in the remainder of the preseason and see if perhaps maybe he can crack a roster spot. I really do think he deserves that spot. I think obviously I think he needs to play his way into it, but I think so far he's been doing just that. So I'm really excited to see if he continues to trend in that direction and earn that spot. But the next guy I wanted to get to, of course, as I just mentioned, was Cameron Payne, because he had a pretty solid game too. This guy had 14 points and went 4 of 6 from downtown in about 23 minutes of action. Again, these are preseason stats, so we can't overlook them too deeply, of course, because you are playing against a bad NBA team, but a bad NBA team that's playing their second and third string players. So you don't want to look at these too deeply and really draw a definitive conclusion, as I mentioned in in my first preseason postgame recap against Charlotte. But still, these games do have meaning to it, especially for guys like Payne and Kolek that are fighting for roster spots, that don't have a guaranteed spot on the roster. I think maybe people will say that Payne will kind of have that spot because they did sign him to a contract, so you sign the guy to a contract to play him. I understand that, but I think Kolek has outperformed him. I really do. I mean, I think there's a way you can still get Payne there if you really feel like you need the shooting over the playmaking, but me personally, I think the playmaking out of that bench unit is way more important right now because last year, playmaking was such a weakness in the second unit, like a massive weakness. Miles McBride, as good of a shooter he is, as good of a defender he is, he's not that good of a playmaker yet. He hasn't really developed that skill yet, and I think Tyler Kolek has kind of got that skill a little bit more down pat than McBride at the moment, and I really think he could really solve so many problems in that regard. And I think it'll open up the floor so much more as well. That's what I personally think, but of course, as the preseason goes along, we'll get a better idea of what the rotations might look like. Perhaps Thibodeau gives Kolek more time at the end of these games throughout the preseason. He didn't play much in the first half, but he did get some minutes in the first half, which I think is pretty significant to note because, if he wasn't really going to play at all, then I don't think he would have had him go in there with some of the guys that are going to play this season. So I think that's noteworthy that he did get some action in the second quarter, but then of course he played a lot of the fourth quarter and stuff, which I fully expected him to do. I didn't really expect much of the starters to get action down the stretch in the second half of the game, not just because it was a blowout, but because it's also the preseason. But either way, I'm really excited to see what Kolek does the rest of the preseason. I think he's been, like I said, one of the biggest surprises so far. I think me personally, I don't know if it's the biggest surprise because I watched him in college, I watched him in summer league, and this guy was a talent, and I knew the Knicks had pressed the right button when they drafted him off rip. But still, I'm happy to see that right away he's making an impact in the preseason and really making a case for a roster spot. It's reminding me of Emmanuel Quickley back in 2020 when it didn't really look like he was going to get that roster spot prior to the start of the preseason, and then he balled out in the preseason and not only earned that roster spot but became their sixth man by season's end. So I'm really hoping that Kolek can follow that same trajectory rather than the Miles McBride trajectory where you kind of sat on the bench for 2 years, didn't get a whole lot of playing time, and then finally got the opportunity, which, of course, for Miles McBride, it's worked out great, but I want to see Kolek get out there right away. I think he's NBA ready. I really do. Me and Davin had this conversation a couple days ago on one of our previous episodes, and we think this guy is ready to get out there on the floor and make an impact right away. I really do. But, that leaves me to my wrapping up points of this preseason episode, because there wasn't much to talk about since the Knicks just basically dominated this game from start to finish. Wasn't like there wasn't really many bad things to note on this one. I think the worst thing you could really talk about here was Towns' inefficiency at the first half. Yeah, that was a bit of a rough sight to see, but the fact that he turned it around in the second half makes up for it. So it's not even really much of an issue in my eyes, at least, anymore. I know some people will probably be a little concerned about the shooting, and if that was Julius Randle, I wonder what the reactions would have been on social media. I do want to point that out at least, but that's besides the point. Other than that, Ariel Hukporti, the other rookie that the Knicks drafted, he gave the Knicks some good minutes too at center. I think that was pretty nice to see. He had a pretty solid impact in that area. I thought that's good to see because we don't have a lot of center depth still, even despite the Towns trade now. We still don't have center depth, and I don't think Hukporti is necessarily going to make the rotation. I don't think he's quite there yet development-wise, but I do think that he kind of has a case to possibly be in there as a third stringer in the event that the Knicks need him to come out and actually play some real minutes. So that's always something. One thing I want to note, though, is that Hukporti played 16 minutes in this game, and Jericho Sims only saw the floor for 2 minutes. I thought that was a little noteworthy. I don't know. Hopefully it's really nothing, and that's just kind of like, they just wanted to get the younger guys a chance as opposed to giving Sims a lot of minutes again as a guy who's kind of already proven that he can be kind of reliable in the NBA, if you will. So maybe that was the case, but also maybe they were trying to see what they get out of Hukporti, and maybe, who knows, maybe they would have thought he would have outplayed him. I mean, Hukporti on the stat sheet had 7 points and 4 rebounds, but I thought he really made a strong impact when Kolek was out there on the floor with him. I thought those two guys really had some good energy going, some good chemistry, so we'll see what happens with that. We'll see if Hukporti gets more minutes or not in the preseason. Who knows? Landry Shamet, on the other hand, he didn't have that good of a game in this one against Washington, his former team. He only went 2 of 10 from the floor and 1 of 7 from 3 in 19 minutes of action. Now, you don't want to see that because this is a guy who is also fighting for a roster spot. He's not guaranteed the spot, but he did have a good first game against Charlotte where he did shoot the ball very well, so hopefully Tom Thibodeau doesn't see this one game right here and kind of draw that as, okay, this guy can't make the roster now anymore because of that. I hope he still gets another opportunity because I do think that there is a way for him to have a really strong impact in the second unit, and I think he can really produce some good shots out of there because we don't have Dante DiVincenzo anymore, so I think Landry Shamet can kind of be that Dante DiVincenzo replacement, if you will. Obviously, it's not to the same level. Obviously, DiVincenzo is a much better player than Landry Shamet, but when you have so many talented superstars in the starting 5, it's not the end of the world to have, kind of lower tier players in that bench unit. I think Shamet can fill in a good role there. So we'll see what happens the rest of the preseason. But guys, we really hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a little shorter, but there wasn't much to talk about with this one because the Knicks, like I said, dominated from start to finish. But it's important to still cover it because they do have preseason games, and the regular season is literally less than 2 weeks away. So we're very excited for that. And once the regular season kicks off, we are really going to get going with a lot of stuff on this page. So be on the lookout for that. But anyways, you can follow us on all of our social media platforms: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Of course, this YouTube page that you are watching the video on. You can follow my personal Twitter account. It is right there on the screen. And I'll see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out.